and welcome back to another episode. In this video, I want to go over something I haven't really gone over before, and that is myths. In particular, Western myths and how they differ from other mythologies you'll find around the world, and how they really form the basis of Western civilization. Now, in the European mythical tradition, whether it be Greek, Roman, Celtic, or Germanic, the one thing that really stands out in these myths, apart from other myths around the world, is the respect for the individual and the individual path. The idea of being a member of a society, of being a citizen, as opposed to a subject, that is a Greek idea, and that is one of the founding realities, or one of the great aspects of Western civilization. And when you look at these myths in the Western tradition, the sense of the individual path is very, very strong. Once again, in the Near East or the Orient, you are an organ in an organism. There's a saying in Japan that the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And the place where we really get this sense of the individual paths is from our myths. And the greatest of these myths are of the Arthurian Romances. And I just want to talk, well, really just two examples to kind of demonstrate this. Now, in one story of King Arthur, King Arthur essentially has all of his knights of the Round Table in his court. And what he says is, before anybody can eat, there's going to have to be an adventure. And in those days, adventures happened with frightening regularity, and sure enough, an adventure happens. And what occurs is these angels suddenly appear and bring forth the Holy Grail, but the Holy Grail itself is covered in a veil. And so everybody kind of gazes at the Holy Grail in rapture, and then the angels depart. So at that point, everybody can eat, because that certainly counts as an adventure. But what happens, though, is Gawain, who is Arthur's nephew, stands up and he proposes a quest that each knight should venture forth and seek out the Grail and to witness it with the veil removed. So what happens then is, after I presume they finish the meal, all the knights gather and they kind of go off into a group until they come to the edge of the forest where the adventure is really to begin. And this is kind of the key line of the story, in that all the knights together kind of collectively decided that it would be a disgrace to go forward in a group. They all vowed at that point to enter the forest at a point of his own choosing, where it was darkest and where there was no path. And what this shows you once again is you're going to find that in a Western myth and not anywhere else. The idea that you have an individual path to follow. The idea that, you watching this video or me talking, we are utterly unique. Every cell in your body, what have you, has never been seen on this planet before, and it will be gone forever when you are gone. And this is, again, a striking contrast to myths you read about in the Orient, where you typically encounter a guru, and the guru knows the path. He may even give you some kind of symbol to follow the path, but when he meets you, he knows where you are on the path, and he may direct you where to go. But that is not in this case in the Arthurian Romances. There is a path, but you have to find it yourself, because you have your own path. You have to find your own unique path. And what's great about these stories is, as the knights go forward, all of them kind of go off on different adventures. But if one of the knights happens across one of the path of another knight and tries to kind of cheat by kind of following it, he never achieves the Grail. And the reason for that is because he's not following his own path at that point. He's following some others. And what it is an analogy for is the ability to kind of fulfill your own potential, that you are unique and you have to find out what your path is in life. And you can use other people as examples, but ultimately it is your own path, and you have to venture into that forest of the unknown by yourself and kind of figure things out. And that is, again, respect for the individual, a very Western idea. The other story I'm going to talk about a little bit, which is kind of along this theme, is the love story of Tristan and Isolde. Now, in the story, the way Tristan and Isolde came about was the troubadours would sing about it. And maybe I should kind of back up again, but in Europe at this time, so again in the Middle Ages, I mean, you had all of these mythic traditions that were already there in the form of Greek, Roman, Celtic, and Germanic. But then imposed on top of that was the orthodoxy of the church at that time, which would have been, you know, from the Near East. And the church, like the idea of arranged marriages, was very much sort of the norm. And arranged marriages are still a norm throughout probably most of the world. But it was the troubadours who expressed the idea of courtly love, the individual path, which was absolutely against what the church was teaching at that time. So the church kind of represented the authority, and the troubadours and their stories were kind of the antithesis of that, I suppose. Now, in the story, Tristan is tasked with bringing Isolde back to Cornwall to marry his uncle, King Mark. Now, on their journey back, Isolde has a nurse named Brannigan, I believe, and this nurse actually has a love potion. And the idea is that when Isolde meets King Mark, that they would both drink the love potion, they would fall in love, and you know, that would be that. But you got to remember, in these times, both Tristan and Isolde are probably like 15 years old, so they're just young kids, very inexperienced, and they happen to be together talking, and they find the love potion, and they mistake it for wine. So they both decide to drink it, and immediately they fall hopelessly in love with each other. And right away, Isolde, being the female and maybe being a little more in tune with these things, she recognizes that something has gone very wrong, and she kind of says, like, you know, are we seasick? Because I have this feeling of sickness. And what the story is trying to express at that point is sort of this idea of the pain of love, potentially, that if you haven't got it in your gut to the point that you can hardly bear it, you know, is not a real thing. And this pain is, like, in your life, is what you have to find. Now, Tristan, at some point, I think the nurse Brannigan kind of finds him and sees that they've drunk of the love potion. And Brannigan says to Tristan, "You have drunk your death." And what she means is that when the authorities, King Mark, etc., or the church finds out what's happened, they're going to be none too pleased. But Tristan, and again, this is kind of, again, the individual path, Tristan looks at Brannigan and says, or in response to this, "I don't know what you mean. If by death you mean the pain of my love for Isolde, that is my life. If by death you mean the punishment that I am to suffer at the hands of society, I accept that. If by death you mean eternal damnation in hell, I accept that as well." And right there in this story, you kind of see the idea of the individual being able to reject the entire system of that time, and again, how the individual path is celebrated in the most basic form in this story. And when you think about it, that's why the stories of King Arthur and the Arthurian Romances still resonate to this day. I mean, Hollywood is constantly remaking these movies, and sometimes they're quite lousy. Although myself, I still quite love Excalibur from the early 80s. Um, but these myths mean something, and it is this respect for the individual path that I believe helped flourish these ideas throughout the idea of the West and Western civilization, and why the Arthurian Romances remain to this day the founding myth of Western civilization. Now, if you're interested in this kind of thing, in myths in general, myths of the West, but also myths of the world, I would highly recommend you read Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces, or also The Power of Myth, which was based on a PBS series that he did with Bill Moyers many, many years ago. But you can find this online, or you can find it on Amazon, and I'll include a link below. So other than that, if you have any questions or comments, particularly related to myths, please leave them in the comments below. If you're interested in me talking more about myths, let me know, but I may just do it anyway because I find it interesting. But other than that, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and until next time.